Over the last 3 years, it has been a rather peculiar phenomenon to watch the Detroit Lions turn into the team that they have. But this upcoming draft could turn the team that we have seen turn into an absolute monster. And we're going to talk about it in this episode, folks. So stay tuned.
What are we? What makes us what we are? And what we're going to be? It's grit. It's what we started with last year, guys. Doesn't matter if you have one ass cheek and 3 toes. I will beat your ass.
Can definitely compete with the big dogs.
10, 5, end zone, touchdown, Detroit Lions.
You guys are unbelievable, man. I'm telling you.
We are driven by Detroit.
Hello, Lions fans, and welcome on back to yet another episode of MCM, Motor City Mania. I'm your host, David T. Pike, and as always, we're diving on in. So here's the thing, folks. We know that the draft is literally this week. It is right around the corner. Today is Monday. The draft is going to be on Thursday night. So it's like, hey, we are almost to the biggest event of the offseason here. And it's like, dude, it's been a long time coming. It's been something that we've been waiting for a long time. We are just excited to get to the draft. And we're definitely going to have a couple more episodes about the draft, obviously, before we get to it. But I wanted to kind of talk about a historical perspective also combined with the upcoming, event of the draft being what it was. And I wanted to take a look at it from this perspective because I, as a historical mind, always find it fascinating when I can look back on something and say, hey, this is where the team is now versus this is where the team was, or for whatever kind of conversation I'm having. But when we take a look at the Lions, the biggest thing about how this team has transformed itself, metamorphosized itself into the organization that it is absolutely just bewildering. It is a phenomenon that we as a group of fans have not seen out of the Lions in a long time. And for me, I think that the biggest reason as to why that change has happened, why that change has been nurtured into the organization and the team that we have right now, is because of the culture that the team has that has been changed and built through the draft over the last couple of years by Brad Holmes and Dan Campbell. Because we have to think about this here, folks. Every damn team that's in the NFL wants to talk about culture, and it's like, okay, we get it, we understand it, it's important for a team to have a culture. But when we talk about the Lions for like the last 20-something years, they didn't have a culture or their culture was losing. And I hate to put it that way, but unfortunately it's the truth. The Lions just did not have a culture. They were always looking for a culture. And it seemed like for the last 20 years, we were trying to take somebody else's culture, and then what we were trying to do was transplant it from where it came from originally and somehow put it here in Detroit and hope it was going to work. We tried it when Matt Millen was here because he decided that he thought, hey, I'm going to keep getting guys from San Francisco and hope that culture translates here. It didn't work. Then, Bob Quinn got here and he's like, hey, I'm going to go get my buddy Matt Patricia and we're going to try and see if we can get the Patriot culture to come out here and work. It didn't work. Again, I've said this multiple times. The only type of culture that is going to work here in Detroit is a Detroit-built culture. It's a culture that has to be indigenous to Detroit. You can't just try and go out and put something else from somewhere else here in Detroit. It ain't going to work. So, that right there, I think, was the biggest ability for the Lions to be able to finally get themselves in this position where they are right now. Because, again, one of the biggest things that has changed is also how the Lions go about the offseason. Again, for all of my older Lions fans, you know exactly what I'm saying here. For the last 20-something years, it always seemed like that when we got to the offseason, the Lions were always trying to make these crazy offseason moves, trying to make large free agent acquisitions, and then when it came time to the draft, they would always draft the best player at a position of need without necessarily considering, hey, is this player the best fit or the best scheme culture for what the team was? And again, that's if we even had a scheme or a culture fit that would have made sense. Because again, I take you guys back to the Matt Millen era. whenever we got into the draft, you could almost guarantee yourself it was going to involve drafting a first-round wide receiver. I mean, for crying out loud, the guy only drafted 4 first-round wide receivers, and of the 4, he only hit on 1. Drafted Roy Williams, Mike Williams, Charles Rogers, and Calvin Johnson Megatron. Those are the only... and Calvin Johnson was really the only one he hit on because, hey, the other 3 pretty much did nothing, and the one's in the Hall of Fame, so go figure. But that's my whole point, is that we would only draft for positions of need and wouldn't necessarily consider, hey, is this guy a fit for the team as far as our scheme or our culture? Because one of the things that a lot of people accused Matt Millen of was saying, well, he was taking guys from multiple schemes and trying to blend them all together and hope somehow it was going to work. Well, that kind of a mindset was going to do one of 2 things. He was either going to work in sheer brilliance or it was going to work in total disaster, and obviously we know which one that was. Now, that was then. This is now. Brad Holmes and Dan Campbell, I can tell you this, they were smart about their approach because what they decided to do was brilliant, but it was absolutely common sense. They decided to say, hey, this is what has been tried to work here for the last, 20-something years. How about we decide not to do that? How about we decide to go the opposite route and we decide to give something a different change of pace here, a different flavor, so to speak. So what they decided to do is opposite of guys like Matt Millen, opposite of guys like Martin Mayhew and all the others, and Bob Quinn and Matt Patricia, they said, hey, instead of trying to build through free agency, what we're going to do is we're going to try and use free agency to kind of plug some holes here, but we're going to build through the draft. Oh, and then the other thing that Brad Holmes and Dan Campbell did that was completely opposite of Matt Patricia and Bob Quinn was to say, hey, rather than being secretive, like, we've got some like massive project going on that we don't want anybody else to know about, including our own media, including our own, people, what we're going to do is we're going to be open, transparent. We're going to teach the players that we have that there's a love for the game that involves being hard work, that involves hard work, so being hardworking and having a good work ethic, but at the same time, we're going to have fun about it. That was the thing that, dude, I'm telling you this right now. Whenever you talk about Brad Holmes and Dan Campbell's organization, it's hard work, but it's fun. The players enjoy being there because they're like, hey, we love these guys because they love the game of football, but they also make it fun. Nobody ever used that word when freaking Bob Quinn and Matt Patricia were there. Fun was not a word that you used in the Lions organization back in those 3-4 years. It just didn't happen. So again, the whole ideology, the whole dynamic of Brad Holmes and Dan Campbell was to say, hey, this is what people in the past have tried to use, and it did not work. How about we use a common sense tactical approach here and say, hey, that didn't work. Let's do the exact opposite of it and see what results we get. And, dude, what the Lions have done through that simple that simple switch is have a perfect execution of the ideology and a perfect execution of their plan, which is, again, resulted in what we currently have today. Now, I'm going to say this. Brad Holmes and Dan Campbell have been the executors of that plan. But I'm not going to just stop there. You also have to include Sheila. Sheila was the one that said, okay, I am going to give these guys the ability to make that plan work. I am going to give them the backing. I am going to give them the time, the resources to make that work. And we got to understand something here. When we were starting in 2021 with Brad Holmes and Dan Campbell, and Sheila was in essence saying, hey, I gave those the last 2 guys I had here 1 year to figure it out. They couldn't, so now I'm going to give it to you guys. We all knew that, hey, there's not going to be necessarily a whole lot of patience on this one because it's like, we need to get this thing figured out because we're tired of rebuilds. That was the fan perspective. Sheila's perspective was, listen, I'm going to be patient because I believe in these guys' visions. And if you think about it, the fact that, they knew, all 3 of them knew, Sheila, Holmes, and Campbell knew that starting over was going to be a process that required patience, it required endurance to make sure that their process was going to have time to properly work. It then allowed them, once they knew that, hey, we're going to get the time we need to make this work, it allowed it to come into full fruition by allowing the team's young core players, which they were drafting, again, heavy emphasis on that, they were drafting these young players, and it allowed them to nurture that scheme, to nurture that culture that I'm talking about from not only terms of an emotional sense, like a family, but also from a schematical sense. So you have to think about it. What the Lions were specifically doing is what they wanted is they wanted to make sure that these players that they were drafting were not only getting the ability to learn what it was going to be like to be a Detroit Lion from Dan Campbell and Brad Holmes' perspective, but they were also learning what it was to be an NFL professional. So what Brad Holmes and Dan Campbell were doing was saying, listen, yes, we are trying to build a winning program here. We are trying to build a winning culture, but we're not going to be doing it from a sense of desperation and trying to force people. We want them to work at what we have. So again, one thing I have learned is that when you put people under pressure, one of two things is going to happen. Either they're going to rise to the occasion or they're going to crumble. That's why you also had to find guys that Brad Holmes and Dan Campbell wanted that were going to be able to respond to that pressure in a sense of, hey, when things get tough, we're going to get tough and we are going to try and make this work. Rather than being like, well, it's too hard for us. We are just going to be here to collect a paycheck. That was, again, that's an old Lions mindset. Oh, well, you know what? I'm just here to collect a paycheck. I'm not really here because I want to win. I'm just here because I want to get paid. So again, a whole different ideology about how the Lions operated and what they were doing. Now, having explained all that, we take a look at the last 3 years of how the Lions have gotten to this point. And I can say this right now. The Lions can be one of the most boastful teams in the NFL over the last 3 years because they have been able to build a successful program based on that process, based on that culture, that ideology that they have developed. But they can also boast a pride in that that process that they have is sustainable and it can be repeated indefinitely. Because we have to think about it here. Once you find something that works in the NFL and you've proven that it works, now you've built up some credit. Now you've built up some goodwill in the eyes of players, in the eyes of other people in the NFL. Because it's like, okay, you found something that works. And until you've proven that it can no longer work, we're going to trust you. We're going to give you the benefit of the doubt. And so you have to think about it. Why does that work? Is that if you think about it, the Lions, what they have done over the last 3 years as far as their drafts are concerned is, like I said, they have shown that they can do it year in and year out. Look at the guys that they've drafted. They have drafted, in 3 years, they have drafted 3 All-Pro players. Amon-Ra St. Brown, first-team All-Pro. Penei Sewell, first-team All-Pro. Sam Laporta, as a rookie, second-team All-Pro. And then they've also drafted multiple Pro Bowlers. St. Brown has been to 2 Pro Bowls. Penei Sewell has been to 2 Pro Bowls. Hutchinson, a Pro Bowl. Laporta, a Pro Bowl. Gibbs, a Pro Bowl. In 3 years to have that many Pro Bowlers and that many All-Pros shows you what they're doing. It definitely works. So the Lions have built a team through the draft, through this process that I've been talking about, that is scary damn good. But it's about to get even more scary, in my opinion. It's about to be a monster. Because think about this. Again, one of my best qualities as a historian is to take a look at each individual year and take a look at it from a qualitative analysis of how things have changed from year 1 to year 2 to year 3. If you take a look at the jump that every year the Lions were able to get out of not only the team that they had, but out of the rookie classes that they had moving in from year to year, this year, I believe, is about to show something that is just absolutely spectacular. Because think about it. Year 1, 3-13-1. Year 2, we added 6 wins on top of that to go to 9-8. And then year 3, we only added 3 wins, but we went from being a team that just missed the playoffs in year 2 to being a team that won 2 playoff games and got to the conference championship game. So the progression, the growth from 1, 2 to 3 has been absolutely exponential. And for me, that is due in large part to 2 simple points. The first point is getting huge contributions from these massive veteran acquisitions like Jared Goff, Alex Anzalone, David Montgomery, Graham Glasgow, etc. Those are guys that the Lions have brought in via trade, via free agency, and they have come in and they have played beautifully, masterfully for the Lions. But even more so, that growth that I'm talking about from year 1 to year 2 to year 3 is much more attributed to the rookie additions that the Lions have had. And in my honest opinion, I fully expect that the Lions will take the next and final step in 2024. That's why when I hear Dan Campbell saying, hey, we're going to make it to a Super Bowl, I believe him. Because it's like, okay, we went from being a bottom feeder team in year 1 of Dan Campbell to being a competitive team in year 2 under Dan Campbell. Then we were a team that literally was a whisker away from getting to the Super Bowl under Dan Campbell. Year 4 is the year we actually get there. Because consider, first and foremost, Brad Holmes and Dan Campbell's draft record, specifically Brad Holmes, since he's the guy that makes the phone calls. In every single draft that Brad Holmes has had, he has drafted at least, I would consider, 3 impact players. So I expect that Brad Holmes is probably going to find at least another 3 or 2 in this draft because that's what he does. Think about it. In the very first draft that Brad Holmes had, Penei Sewell, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Aleem McNeil are the first 3 that come to mind. You move to the next draft in 2022, Aiden Hutchinson, then you got Jameson Williams. I know some people are still very iffy on Jameson Williams, but the way I look at it is, yeah, Jameson Williams is an impact player. You get him on the field, you put the ball in his hands, he's an impact player. And then you also had in year 2022 Kirby Joseph as well. So you had those guys. And then you go to 2023, and good Lord, the first 4 guys that we drafted were impact players. I mean, for crying out loud, Jack Campbell, Jahmyr Gibbs, Sam Laporta, Brian Branch. Don't really have to debate too much on that one. So as far as I am concerned, you have a very good quality, a very good chance of the Lions finding more impact players in year 4 for Brad Holmes' draft record. Now, second, let's examine the growth that each one of those draft classes, each one of those impact players that I'm talking about has had from year to year to year. Think about it. St. Brown, McNeil, Sewell, and Hutch, every single year that they've been in, whether it's been the fact that they've been in now for going on their 4th year, their 3rd year, whatever the case is, they have shown massive growth every single year. Think about it. Amon-Ra St. Brown went from being just under 1,000 yards to just being over 1,000 yards to having like, what was it, 1,200 or 1,300 yards in his 3rd year? So you're seeing that growth. You saw Aleem McNeil being from a middle round kind of prospect in the draft to now he's one of the best interior defensive linemen in the NFL. You saw Hutch in his very first year get 9.5 sacks and then increase it to 11.5 sacks and over 100 pressures as an edge rusher. My whole point is this. You're seeing that progression. And then Penei Sewell, I mean, for crying out loud, the guy's an all-pro. He's considered the best right tackle in the league and one of the best switching tackles that you could have because he can play both left and right. So it's like, come on now. The growth, the progression you're seeing in all of these impact players from year to year is substantial. And let's think about it. Last year's impact players, Jack Campbell, Jahmyr Gibbs, Sam Laporta, Brian Branch, all those guys were high impact players. And that was just their rookie year. Imagine how much they're going to have in their 2nd year, folks. That is something that I am really, really earnestly waiting to see. But then when you think about it, like I said, last year's draft class had a huge impact, right? That was with the roster that we currently have right now. Now you have a full established roster that has got a great culture and it's got great talent on it. You add even more talent through the draft that Brad Holmes has been great at doing. Just imagine what kind of a beast, what kind of a monster you have got sleeping, waiting to unleash itself on the NFL here. Think about that, folks. That's why I have the episode the way I have it, because the way I'm looking at it is, okay, we've already got all of this talent. The NFL already knows we're a team to be reckoned with. You add just a little bit more to that. It is like literally putting nitro inside of a souped-up fast car, and it's just going to take off like a damn bullet. So for me, like I said, I fully expect that the Lions are going to add more impact players. And I would not be surprised if they add it on defense, because if we can get the defense to be at the same pace to match the offense that we currently have, because we already know we have a top 5 offense. But if we could just get that defense to be a middle-of-the-pack defense, or maybe just outside the top 10, I believe that in Season 4, like Dan Campbell said, there is almost nothing that I think that can stop the Lions from getting to a Super Bowl, and dare I even say win a Super Bowl, except the team itself. So my whole point is this. Brad Holmes, Dan Campbell, Sheila, and all the other people that are a part of that organization, they have built a monster of a team. that has already shown how well it can bully other teams, how well it can take over and, destroy other opponents. And now I fully expect that Brad Holmes and Dan Campbell will be putting the final pieces of their grandmaster genius plan together into effect to create a team that once unleashed on the NFL this upcoming year, it's going to terrify teams. It is going to terrify the NFL because it's like, listen, you name me one team in the NFL right now that has done such a good job over the last 3 years of free agency, drafting, culture development, and everything else. You will not find a better team than the Detroit Lions. The Detroit Lions have a team right now that it's like, listen, from top to bottom, it's stellar. It is solid as a damn rock. So for me, it's like, okay, I'm feeling pretty good about this upcoming draft. I'm feeling pretty good about where we're going into this upcoming season. I feel pretty good about the Lions being a team that ain't nobody going to want to mess with and that we can actually get to a Super Bowl. Is it going to be difficult? Yeah, it's going to be difficult. But that's what makes our team a gritty team. That's what makes our team the team that it is. And I fully expect we will rise to the challenge. But anyway, folks, I just wanted to put this episode together because we are so close to the draft and it seems like the offseason is almost done. So it's like, hey, time to start looking a little bit forward here. But having said that, I'm going to end the episode, and I just want to say to everybody, thank you all for watching in another episode of MCM Motor City Mania. If you like what you saw, by all means, I highly encourage you all to do one of these 3 things. Like, comment, and subscribe to the channel. If by chance you subscribed in the past and you forgot to do so at the time, or you just subscribed, you not had a chance to do so, again, I just want to say thank you all for everything you guys do and hope that you guys subscribe. Please do. It helps me out, and I'm so thankful for everyone that I've gotten so far. You guys are an absolutely amazing, wonderful crowd. But I also ask you, please, make sure you turn on that bell notification icon as well, so that way you guys never miss any more content that I push out. Also encourage y'all, please, to share this content with your Lions friends and family members. Share it here on YouTube, share it on Twitter, share it on Facebook, share it anywhere and everywhere you can with everybody and anybody that you can. The more we can share it, the greater the channel spreads, the greater the channel grows. And with that being said, again, I just want to say thank you all to all you guys. You guys are absolutely awesome. You're an amazing community, and I'm so thankful for every single one of y'all, especially after yesterday. You guys are absolutely wonderful. I also want to say thank you all for everything that you guys do for me and for each other. You guys are just great. Hey, I also want to say, hope you got something that makes you happy, makes you smile. God bless. And until the next time we meet, I'll see you all in the next episode.